For the last 12 months, I've been completing a year-long reading challenge of monthly prompts, which I created as a way to have a bit of fun with my reading in 2025. It's called the Read Good Challenge, which has nothing to do with Goodreads. It's because my channel is called Ben Reads Good. And on the story graph, over 900 of you have joined in with the challenge, which has been super exciting. The good news is that the Read Good Challenge will be back for 2026, and I'm currently preparing next year's set of prompts. These are going to be a mixture of old and new themed monthly challenges. If you have taken part in the Read Good Challenge this year, I would love to get your feedback, and I've set up a survey for you to do just that. You'll be able to tell me which prompts you most enjoyed, which ones you didn't like so much, and even suggest your own ideas. The punnier the better. Let's dive right in then, starting with January, which the prompt was Annuary, to read a book written by someone called Anne or with the name Anne in the title. And this year I chose to read The Gathering by Anne Enright. And I read this partly because it's one of my other reading goals to read more Booker winners, and this won the Booker Prize in 2007. And it's the second book I've read by Anne Enright. And I'll be honest, I think this made me realise that she just isn't for me as an author. This is very well written. It's essentially about an Irish woman who returns home when her brother passes away, and she has to take some of the responsibility for organising the funeral and making everything that needs to happen after death happen. And I just felt very distant from it. I mean, the premise and the situation of it is very good. The high points are the family drama when everyone comes back together, but I just didn't love being in the head of this character. And I think it too easily veers off down these sort of alleys of memory. And the style, I didn't find it engaging. I think Anne Enright is clearly a very talented writer. I just don't gel with the words that she puts down on the page. In February, the prompt was Flamuary, and you had to read a book with an image of fire on the cover of the book. It surprised me how many books I had that had some sort of flame-based image on the front of the cover, but the one I chose to read was Three Fires by Denise Mina, and I chose this partly because I'd previously read Rizzio by Denise Mina and absolutely loved it. Rizzio was part of a series of books commissioned by a publisher where it asks Scottish authors to go back and reimagine certain parts of Scotland's history in very short, sharp little novellas. This book is not part of that series, which is called Darkland Tales, but it is very similar. It's a very short historical novel, but instead of taking place in Scotland, this takes place in Italy, and it tells the story of the rise to power and subsequent fall from grace of this religious man in Italy called Girolamo Savonarola. And I guess the story it is telling is of the Bonfire of the Vanities, which I'd heard that term before. I think there's a famous film of the Bonfire of the Vanities that I haven't seen, but I didn't really know anything about what that was. And it turns out it's really interesting. It's essentially a period of very extreme puritanical power that put lots of the things that we enjoy into buckets of sin. And I just loved how this was told. It's a very short book. It's very engaging. I loved the voice here. Sometimes with historical fiction, I find it quite jarring that it almost reads like cosplay, like the language can be a little bit too try-hard. But the voice in this, the voice of the narrator that is very modern. It's very much a narrator looking back at that period and evaluating it with a modern voice, modern sensibilities, and that works because there are so many modern parallels. I really, really enjoyed this. Not quite as much as Rizzio, but I would definitely read more historical fiction from Denise Mina. The prompt for March was the Ides of March, and the Ides of March is a very famous calendar day on which Julius Caesar was murdered, and it refers to the 15th of March. And in honour of the 15th, the challenge was to read a book with 15 letters in the title. They didn't need to be 15 different letters, they just needed to be 15 letters in the title. So I chose Vernon God Little 636, which adds up to 15. It would have been very highly embarrassing if I held up a book that wasn't in fact 15 letters. This is another Booker winner, and I think it's quite a divisive book. This is written by an Australian, DBC Pierre, but it's written with a very distinct, almost cartoonish Texan drawl. It is about a young boy called Vernon who is caught up in this media frenzy about something that has happened that we don't quite know what it is at the start, but it does reveal itself over the course of the book. It's very foul-mouthed, it is very farcical, it gets weirder and weirder, and it's, I think, very satirical of sort of American media. And the core of it, the inciting incident itself, is something very American and very devastating. And I just really, really enjoyed it. I know a lot of people hate this book and find it a painful read. Painful as in, like, just really bad. I loved it. I really enjoyed spending time with this character, even if I didn't like him. It's just lots of fun. Well, tempered fun, because it's also a bit miserable. Then in April, the challenge was to read a book nominated for the Women's Prize. Now, this could be from any year of the Women's Prize, so there are hundreds of books to choose from. I did end up picking a book from this year's prize, though, which was Nesting by Roisin O'Donnell. And I knew some people who had read this before I got to it, and I'd heard nothing but good things. And they were all correct, because this book is fantastic. I read this physically and listened to it on audio at the same time, and I found it very well done on audio. There are parts that are phone conversations, and I don't know if it's a different actress speaking those parts or just the narrator doing a different accent, but it had some like effects on the voice to make it sound like a phone call. I thought it was all really immersive and well done. But this is a very human story of a marriage in which there is abuse, but that abuse isn't physical, and how hard it is to describe something when you can't point to a bruise, or there is an atmosphere of fear that's very, very difficult to bring to life for someone else. It also shows how leaving is just the start, and like on the back of this it says leaving is one thing, staying away is another. And that's a very true thing about this book that I think it portrays really, really clearly. For this character, it is so hard to take the step when you are not sort of the breadwinner and you are the primary caregiver. It's very difficult to step away, and then it can be so tempting to go back because it is just easier. You don't have to navigate the care system and the hotels that you stay in and the way that people treat you. I think the care system is very interestingly explored in this book, and it is just a tale of determination that I really admired. Then we move on to May, which is a prompt I chose purely for the pun, which was Déjà Vu, and the challenge for this month was to reread something. Now, I am not a big rereader, and as of right now, I have not completed this prompt, so I am looking to fail my own challenge. I really don't know if I'm going to reread anything, but there were a couple of things that I had in mind, which actually are just behind me. So a few things that I could reread. One would be like really easy, which would be a poetry collection. And I don't read many poetry collections, so I don't have many to choose from. But one I could reread is Ocean Vuong's Night Sky with Exit Wounds, which I read a while back. I didn't love it because I didn't really massively understand it, and I do always struggle a little bit with poetry, but I'm trying to read more to learn a bit more about image and the sound of words and writing, just to improve my own craft. So that's one option. Another would be like a short book that I read a long time ago and didn't necessarily have like the reading capability to appreciate at the time, I think, which is Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. I wonder, having read a few hundred books since I read this, whether I'll have a lot more understanding and appreciation for what it's doing and how it's doing it now. My other option would be to use the wildcard prompt, which was called Agatha All Along. And it meant you could read an Agatha Christie as a substitution for any prompt that you couldn't get to. I have not cashed that particular chip just yet, and it could be a nice cozy thing to do in December or over Christmas or something. I don't have any Agatha Christie books, though. Actually, that's a lie. I have And Then There Were None, but I have read that one. So I don't have any that I haven't read. So if you have any particular Agatha Christie's that you would recommend I turn to, because there are so many, please do let me know. June was a returning prompt, which was Reading Shame Forgiveness Month. And the idea of this was that you could come back to something that you feel ashamed that you haven't read, or some other sort of source of shame in your reading life. It could be literally anything, and address that, no questions asked. My flavour of shame this year was trying to deal with the shame I feel when I buy a hardback book and I intend to read it and then don't get around to it until the paperback is released. When I see a book in a bookshop on the paperback table and I'm like, oh, that's on my shelf at home and I still haven't read it, I do feel a deep shame. And I think it's time that I start sorting that shit out. So I took a baby step in Reading Shame Forgiveness Month and read Hard by a Great Forest by Leo Vardiashvili. And this is a book about a Georgian man who goes back to his home country to find his brother, who has gone to find his father. And it's a bit of, I guess, an odyssey. It's a hero's journey. It's a book that marries heart and humour. It's got, I guess, fun and funny dialogue, but it's got some really deep emotional cores about national trauma and how immigrants can take those traumas with them and pass them down to their children, and the clash between trying to keep your culture alive and trying to minimise the impact of the trauma to your children. So I love the idea of this book, and I did enjoy reading it. I didn't love it as much as I expected to, though, and I expected to because people had said, oh, if you really like Glorious Exploits, you're going to love this book. It's got the same sort of tone and vibe, and it didn't quite get there for me. I think I found the plotting a little bit, I don't want to say predictable, but it felt very conventional. Like, I think it could have pushed some of those levers a little bit further, but I definitely would be on the lookout for whatever Vardiashvili writes next. I don't know why it's so dark in here. It's a very dreary day. I'm just going to go and open the shutters a little bit more. Is that any better at all? Probably not. Oh well. Right, in July it was a very simple prompt. It was to read a book in translation, and I read On the Calculation of Volume 2 by Solveig Ballet, translated by Barbara J. Haviland. She got a J in the middle. Now, I was very lukewarm about the first book in this series because I liked the premise, which is that this woman, Tara Seltzer? This woman, Tara Selter, she wakes up one day and she finds that she is repeating the 18th of November, and that just carries on and on and on, and she's just experiencing the same day over and over again. And I liked that idea, which isn't necessarily revolutionary, right? We've got lots of Groundhog Day stories, but I don't know that I've read a very literary version of that story, but this was really, really incredibly slow-paced and interior, and I think that applies more so to the second volume. So this had a nice thematic core. In the first volume, she is sort of getting to grips with the rules of this world and how it works. She is testing different things and trying to figure out how she can get out of this loop. In the second one, it has a really nice thematic core to it, which is how do you experience a year, experience seasons, when all you have is one day? And the answer is sort of physically moving around. But I don't think anything interesting happens. So to me, it became just very repetitive. Like, she went to a place and she spent some time there and she enjoyed this part of the season until she stopped enjoying it, and then she went somewhere else. So for me, this was worse than the first book, but the very, very end, like literally the last paragraph, sparked my interest again, and I have since read the third volume of the book, which I will be reviewing in full soon, and I do think that was a tick back up. So hopefully it will build from there, but I still need to fully digest my thoughts and share them with you. Moving on then to August, and the prompt was to read a book by a Booker winning author. Now, this didn't have to be the book that they won the Booker Prize for, and it could be the English language Booker or the International Booker. I did read a winner of the English language prize, though, and that was Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders. I reviewed this very recently, so I will not go into detail about it, but I absolutely loved this book. I expected to, because I think George Saunders is a terrific writer, but I'd always been a little bit intimidated by the style of this, which is written almost quite like script-like, but it is a book that is full of ideas. It's loud, it's cacophonous, it is historical, but it's very modern, it's super weird, it's unreal, but it has this very human heart to it, this core of emotion that I was very, very moved by, and I thought it was beautiful and brilliant, and I am so excited now for George Saunders' new novel, Rizzio, which is coming out in January. I will be first in line at the bookshop to get a copy, and I just can't wait, because this guy is a gem. September was arguably the easiest prompt of all, because I just chose what I remember thinking was the birthstone for September, which is a sapphire. But now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know. I don't keep track of birthstones and crystals and all of that stuff. But it was called Sapphire September, and the idea was just that you read a book with a blue cover, and I opted for Andrew Porter's The Imagined Life, and this is absolutely terrific. It is just this beautiful account of a man trying to figure out what happened to his father, who left the family home when he was a child, and he hasn't seen him since. It has this beautiful cinematic prose. It is so lusciously written. It is so atmospheric, but it's also very interior and ponderous in a way that isn't boring. It has a core plot that's really driving the book, with a question that is slowly answered, and the answer to that question is very satisfying but also upsetting and heartbreaking. I found it a book that was kind of mysterious and hazy. It had this very Californian hue. It was almost like watching a David Fincher film, I think, but set in California. Where is David Fincher from? Okay, David Fincher was not born in California, but he was raised there, so maybe that tracks. I just think it's a very, very, very good novel. In October, we had another returning prompt, which was Ugtober, and the idea was to read a book with an ugly cover. You might fight me on this, but I chose We Live Here Now by C.D. Rose. I think this is a good idea that is badly executed, and I really dislike completely shiny covers. I do always have this question, actually, which is, especially in like remainder bookshops or cheap bookshops, there are versions of books that I know that have nice like textured or spot glossed covers, but there are shiny versions of them, and I don't understand why those shiny versions get made. Like, I never see them on sale anywhere else, so I'd love to know if there are any insiders out there in book production. Please do explain that to me. Anyway, this is a book that was shortlisted and then subsequently won the Goldsmiths Prize this year, and I will be reviewing it in full soon, so I won't go into too much detail, but I did like this. I think the writing and the concept is really terrific. It's almost like short stories that are all connected by this specific, not real artist, but it's about art and capitalism and lots of fun and unsettling ideas that don't give you tons of answers, but definitely give you lots to think about. I was frequently confused though, and I probably missed a lot by not being very au fait with the art world, but it was still enjoyable moment to moment. For the penultimate month of the year, it was No Comfort November, and the idea was to read a book outside of your usual comfort zone. So if you are someone who always reads crime, maybe try a romance. I am someone who almost always reads literary fiction, and so I chose to read some non-fiction, and I did intend to pick The Last Act of Love by Kathy Rensenbrink for this prompt, which I have now read, but I didn't finish it until into December. So instead I picked the one non-fiction book that I did manage to finish in November, which was Bird by Anne Lamott. And the reason I wasn't originally going to put this one as my pick for No Comfort November is because it's really not an uncomfortable book at all. It's actually rather cozy, and it is like a new friend telling you everything they've learned about life in a very engaging and funny and enjoyable way. I very much enjoyed being in Anne Lamott's company. The book is ostensibly about writing, but there is so much personal anecdote and so much that can be applied to just living a manageable life or engaging fully with the world around you without being overwhelmed, that I think even if you're not interested in writing, or you are interested in just like journaling for yourself, I think it's still a really worthwhile book reading. There are a few things in it I don't think that have aged brilliantly, but you know, all writing is of its time, and overall I just really enjoyed it. And then finally, December is Decembros, and your challenge is to read a book that is about brothers or brotherhood. I have not read my book for this challenge, but I have picked the one that I'm going to read, which is Intermezzo by Sally Rooney, which is about a couple of brothers and grief and chess, and I really enjoy Sally Rooney's writing. I've been wanting to read this for ages. I'm very excited to finally make the time and space to do so. And helpfully, this also does fulfill my savage prompt December challenge, which is to read a book with your favourite animal on the front. And you're not missing things here. There is no animal on the front of this cover, but the paperback edition has a whippet on the front. And I am a big dog lover. I especially love whippets. And so I'm going to make this book do double duty for both of my challenges. So that was my quick rundown of everything I have read or plan to read for the Read Good Challenge in 2025. And as mentioned, I would love to hear what your favourite reads from this year's challenge are down in the comments. Don't forget to give me your feedback on the challenge if you have taken part this year, because it will influence what I do for the 2026 challenge. I'm currently beavering away trying to figure out exactly what the mix of prompts will be. I want to, as usual, keep it a mixture of old ones and new ones, so we'll figure out which ones get swapped out. But I'll be announcing what the new prompts are in a couple of weeks' time, so that you've got time before the end of the year to shop your own shelves or start getting holds in at the library, so that you are ready for whatever you need to read in 2026. Hopefully you've enjoyed this quick video. If you have, as usual, giving it a like really helps the channel out, and if you'd like to see more from me, then hit subscribe. But until next time, toodles.